Hi, my name is Rose Nordine. I am recording for the Cybersecurity 33250 Computer Security class, and my presentation is on the dangers of public Wi-Fi and how to stay safe. The topics that I want to talk about are man-in-the-middle attacks, malware, and evil twin attacks. One thing that I found that was kind of interesting is this quote from Luke Bency, and he talks about how there are those that who have been attacked, those who will be attacked, and those who are being attacked right now and just don't know it yet. So this was an interesting graph that I found when I was researching this, and the majority of people, 35% of people that access public Wi-Fi's, they access 3 to 4 times a month. 23% of people use public Wi-Fi's to cut down on their cellular data usage. And 20% of people that use 20% of the public Wi-Fi usage is done so to make financial transactions, which is pretty scary actually, because that's a pretty risky thing to do. The most common places that people use public Wi-Fi is at restaurants and hotels. So you can see as part of this graph that cafes and restaurants are at the top, airports next, and hotels are at 20%. 4 in 10 people have had their information compromised while using public Wi-Fi's, and the majority of the people have had their information compromised at airports and restaurants. So that was at the top. So according to the Forbes Advisor, which is where I got this graph, 23% of users that they surveyed think public Wi-Fi is safe. So it's a pretty risky thing. So while I was doing my research, there are the 3 items that I wanted to cover. So first thing I want to talk about are the man-in-the-middle attacks. So for man-in-the-middle, what was interesting about this is that for man-in-the-middle, many organizations actually practice what is called man-in-the-middle attacks. So whether they claim to do it or not, or claim to know that they do it, organizations actually do man-in-the-middle attacks on their employees. So they monitor their employees, and they do it without their employees even knowing it. So they say they do it for like advertising purposes, and just kind of monitor their employees for just to see basically what their employees are doing. Also, governments are known for man-in-the-middle attacks. They spy on their own citizens, and they spy on other governments as well. And they spy on other countries to get classified information, and also steal money for to get the financial means to fund their projects, etc. So it's a pretty big deal. So that was pretty interesting information that I found on that. Also, there was a man in the browser. That was an interesting malware attack that's typically delivered via the browser, and it's kind of geared toward banking and financial institutions. So that was it's a malware attack that's delivered via the browser, and it's really hard to detect because it comes in kind of in the background, so people don't even know what's happening, and it's just kind of it's geared basically just to steal somebody's financial information. There was also man in the mobile, so it's basically used, or another name was man in the phone, used to find a way around the SMS two-factor authentication. And then another one was man in the cloud, or man in the IoT. And that was kind of a newer attack, kind of for the Internet of Things. it's just so new. I think we're going to be hearing more about that just because of the Internet of Things was something that's coming out more and more. So we're going to be hearing more and more about these types of attacks. One of the next thing I wanted to talk about was malware. So there were just malware stands for malicious software. So there were different examples: the ransomware, Trojans, spyware, virus, worms, and rootkits. So the ransomware, we've been hearing a lot about these types of attacks in the news lately. So these types of attacks lock out files and or encrypt files. So they force victims to pay a ransom. We've been hearing a lot about, there was that attack recently on Minneapolis public schools. So there was that one, and there's been several in the news lately. So that's been very common. Trojans, they present itself as something useful, and then they gain access, and then they wreak havoc to steal information within the system. Another is spyware or keyloggers. So they basically secretly record the victim's activities, and then they report the information back to the attacker. Viruses, these attach to another program, and when they're executed, and then they modify or infect with their own code. Worms, they're similar to viruses, and they're self-replicating though, and then they can just spread on their own. And then the rootkits were pretty interesting because they give the attacker remote control of the compromised device. So as far as malware goes, to remove malware, what you can do is you can install like the antivirus or a security program, keep that software up to date, run regular scans. And then the main thing is basically to change your password. So if you find you've been attacked, you want to change your passwords, and not just the password for the software. You want to change your passwords really to anything on your system. Anything that your email, social media accounts, your shopping sites, your credit card sites, anything that you pay, like your banking, financial software sites. You don't really know when you were attacked or what you logged into since then. So it's best to just change everything and just to try to be safe. You don't know what data was compromised from the last time, and you just want to really be safe. One thing you want to even do with your passwords is think about a password manager. It's something that is it's a better way to take care of your passwords, and then you don't have to try to remember everything. So that's something you can think about as well. And then to protect yourself against malware, as far as browser domains, you can pay attention to the domain itself and be wary of a site if it's not a top level domain, like something that ends with com or mil or net, org, edu, biz. Those are kind of the main ones. You want to pay attention to that. Use strong passwords and multi-factor authentication, at the very least two-factor authentication, and avoid ads when browsing. So sometimes if you're clicking too fast, you can accidentally click on ads when you're just kind of browsing through. So pay attention and slow down. Also want to avoid emails with attachments, and I read to avoid emails from unknown users, but even sometimes attachments from users that you know, because sometimes your friends can be hacked. So you just really want to pay attention to those attachments and things that you're receiving. Also, your trustworthy downloads from trustworthy websites and peer-to-peer file transfer networks. So you just want to make sure that you're downloading from reputable software download sites. Also, when you download from a Google Play, Apple Store, etc., you want to make sure that you stick to the official apps, and also not to jailbreak your phone. I know that's kind of a popular thing to do, so you don't want to do anything like that. Also, you want to make sure that your operating system and your apps are up to date. And when your plugins, you want to make sure everything's patched and you're ready to go with that. And if you're not using a program anymore, just go ahead and just uninstall it and just be done with it and get rid of it. And then make sure you're backing up regularly so that if something does get compromised or damaged, you can recover it. So that's just something you can think about doing. Also, there was a common question, also, can Macs be compromised? And yes, Macs can be attacked with ransomware, spyware, Trojans, keyloggers, and unique threats come out on a regular basis. Also, with mobile devices, they too can be affected with malware, ransomware, spyware, Trojans, worms. And also, one thing to keep in mind is that if your mobile device is hacked, your camera and your microphone, anything you see and anything you can say, if your phone is hacked, the bad guys can see and hear anything that you're doing. So always keep that in mind. Okay, and the final attack on a public Wi-Fi that I wanted to talk about was the evil twin attacks. So the reasons that hackers use this form of attack is that what this is really is that hackers will take and use, basically kind of mimic a fake hotspot. And what they do is they'll kind of use something that's similarly named. So it's really hard to identify. So what they do, the reason they do this is they want to steal account names, passwords, and maybe even redirect the victim to like a phishing site so that they can install malware and get those or get the passwords and names. Hackers might also be able to see the contents of the files or whatever the victim downloads or uploads whenever that victim is attached to this evil twin website or a hotspot. So an evil twin connection also means that the hacker can eavesdrop. So and they can get involved in the conversation between the victim and any server. So if the victim is doing any financial transactions, etc. So that's kind of what that hacker is looking for. Because it's so hard to tell, because there's sometimes similarly named, what you can do to try to prevent this is, if wherever you're at this Wi-Fi location, you can check with a staff member to see what the public Wi-Fi is actually named. So that's one thing that you can actually do, is ask someone who works there what public Wi-Fi is named. You can also, one of the red flags is that if the Wi-Fi that you're attempting to log into has no password, that is something that you definitely want to look for, because they will have passwords or some kind of a secondary site that will ask for some kind of login. Also look for something with personal or misspelled names. So those are some kind of things that will kind of tip you off to that. You also might want to look for the when you're looking for a website, it's HTTPS means secure. So you want to look for that S with the site with the URL. So some of the things that you can do to protect yourself when logging onto a public Wi-Fi is you always want to, if you can try to avoid using the Wi-Fi networks, especially if they're not password protected. If you do need to use a public Wi-Fi, limit yourself to just browsing and reading, and definitely avoid entering anything that uses your login credentials. Number 2 is log out of any secured sessions whenever you're not using them. And like social networks will do this automatically, but it's still, you want to manually do that if you can. And you want to look for websites with that S and at the beginning to make sure that you're logging into secured websites. You can also find there's apps or extensions that will force the browser to visit only secured websites. So you may want to think about installing one of those. Also use multi-factor or at least two-factor authentication whenever possible. And also think about purchasing, installing, and using a virtual private network. That is something that would help you to remain safe on a public Wi-Fi network. And also look out for potential phishing emails that ask for passwords or private information. Be wary of emails that carry attachments and that could have malware that might expose you to malware attacks, such as like man in the middle itself. So things that you can do to protect yourself. Thank you for listening to my presentation.